says connecting. I think we're live. All right, welcome everyone to the Omnichannel engagement session. I'm Tom Melbourne and moderator of this session. So my background is in building B2B SaaS teams at early stage companies. I'm also the founder of Open Market. I'm really excited for this panel and the conversation we're about to have. So a couple of quick housekeeping things. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat. We'll either work through them as we're going through the conversation. If not, we'll leave some time at the end to make sure that we connect with your questions. And so let's jump in and get started. I'd like to have our speakers just kind of kick it off with some quick introductions. So Joe, let's start with you for the intros.
Sure. Hi everyone. My name is Joe Venuti. I am the Vice President of Sales Development for Upkeep.
All right, SK.
Hi, everybody. I'm SK Panda. I am the global head of smart tech, high tech, and startup sales at Lumen Technologies.
All right, perfect.
And I guess I'm next. I'm Alex Luke, co-founder and CEO of 11site.
Awesome. Well, really excited to have the three of you here today. And like I said, I'm excited about jumping into this conversation. I think let's set the stage a little bit for the listeners a bit more about what we're going to be talking about in this session, right? I think omnichannel is such a simple word, and I think depending on the room you're talking about what omnichannel is that you're in, I think you're going to have different definitions. And so I think the way that we're thinking about this today is really just around meeting prospects and customers, where they are, and delivering the same experience as them, regardless of whatever channel they're in. So I don't think it's a secret to anyone, listening to this session that the B2B sales environment has really changed. It's gotten a lot more social and a lot more digital. And the majority of that's happening online now. So let's start with kind of like the most obvious change agent that's happened, in the last few years that's, driving the changes in sales, which is really just the pandemic. I think it's clearly changed the way they sell, the way that we buy. And I think it's really accelerated the rise, of remote work and digitization of all of that. And so the expansion of, content and video communications definitely has changed the way that buyers are engaging. And I think that as we're pushing through the pandemic and that's sort of subsiding, we're going to go back to business as usual. I'm curious if you think that this digital change and transformation to omnichannel ways that we connect with customers is here to stay, or do you think that we end up, kind of working back to business as usual? And so, Joe, I'd like to start with you for that question.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if the last 2.5 years has taught us anything, the sales landscape and the way that people buy and sell is ever evolving. I don't ever think we will go back to a world like we had pre-COVID. Too many companies have pivoted to fully remote, full hybrid. And quite honestly, selling is going to be dictated by the prospects. And prospects have gotten very comfortable buying in a digital heavy manner. Not needing the face-to-face interactions. So I think that, we're not going back to the way that we were. Are things going to stay exactly like they are? No, I think that there's probably, a balance somewhere in the middle, more of a hybrid. But what I do know is companies absolutely need to be able to sell through whatever mechanism the prospect is most comfortable buying. And that's going to be different person to person. And I think that is the epitome of omni-channel selling and what every company needs to get up to speed on quickly, because as the world opens, as there's more availability of different avenues to buy and sell, you've got to be able to cater to what every single prospect wants in that moment, because you have them for a moment in time. And if you cannot capitalize, it's revenue out the door.
Yeah, I agree with all that. SK, what are your thoughts on this trend? Are we going back?
Exactly. Beautifully put, Joe. I 100% agree. And look, human beings are social animals. We love to connect. There's a value and a premium to being present in real life. However, there are realities that the pandemic showed us. And should we create opportunities for us to have and to the physical aspect? Absolutely, yes. We need to have that. That's the only way to maintain business continuity, business redundancy, and also enable customers and prospects to be able to connect with the sellers as and when they want to. and at their convenience. I think that's the most important aspect. Lots of customers, lots of companies pivoted very beautifully in 2020, 2021, and had some of their best selling, behind the screens, because they just gave the ability to the customer to reach them as they wanted to. And that's the key part here, the customer experience. So as we go into this digital world, I think more emphasis will be on ways and means to actually make this more effective. So the ability to reach the business as and when a prospect wants to, I think will become the key.
Alex, curious your thoughts on this. Is the trend here to stay?
Definitely yes. And there are actually several trends that are actually driving us more towards omnichannel. One is clearly the pandemic made us realize that we can do a lot more work online with video. And at the beginning of it, we used whatever video was possible. Now, one of the things that has been happening is different video applications are focusing on different needs, right? This is not Zoom. We are on AirMeet because this is a conference. What a courtroom needs is different than what a classroom needs, right? And as we talk about business to customer engagement and connecting to prospects on prospects terms, a platform that's optimized for the needs of sales and marketing organizations becomes essential, right? The second thing is, like, when the internet first came, the website of a company was the main source of information. So the companies would try to convert on the website. Today, that's no longer the case. You go to Capterra, you go to G2, maybe you read about a company on LinkedIn. So what becomes important is to give the prospect to connect with that business with one click instantly, not 5 days from now. Because somehow we lost that ability of the phone rings, you pick it up, and we schedule meetings from 5 days from now. And on short sales cycles, especially if, like, for those businesses whose sales cycles are 30 days or less, 5 to 10 days kills the deal, right? I have an experience, like last December, we need the payroll company. We reached out to Paychex, ADP, and TriNet. They made me fill out census forms, etc. By the time ADP and Paychex called me to schedule a meeting, I had a handshake with TriNet. I'm not going to go back and then rethink this whole thing. And industry statistics show that if you schedule a meeting, 30% of the people don't show up. Whoever talks to the prospect first, actually, chances are is going to get that deal. And in all of this, it becomes even more important to have tools that you guys in the audience use that allows your prospect to connect to you on their terms without download, without appointments. So yes, it's here to stay, and it's becoming more and more focused on the needs of different segments, especially for this audience.
You talked, I think it's super interesting. And one of the things you'd mentioned is that, like, people aren't necessarily going to the website anymore. I agree with that. I think that they're finding ways that they're learning about your content, something like G2. And you talked about just this one click being, able to connect in. Can you share more about what you mean on that?
So we are our first customer, right? So if you go, for example, to Capterra, and if you go to our profile page, you can just click a link and that will initiate a video call. Essentially, what we have done is we have reduced the digital communication identity of an individual or a department to a URL. So if you type in vcall.link/11 sales, you are calling our sales department. What we can do is we leverage the call context. Whoever is calling, maybe there is an email information we have, and we pick the most suitable available agent to connect that call to. The result is an instant eye contact with the prospect on the prospect's terms without requiring the prospect to download anything. And we can even provide ourselves with information about what's the get of this meeting, right? Because we can retrieve data from the CRM, which is important because you want to be prepared for that meeting and you want to nail that meeting. It's important what first impression you deliver. And then we all sales guys hate updating the CRM afterwards. So we also automate that. So whatever transpired in that meeting, however the deal has been moved forward, can be then put back into the CRM. So what happens is that instead of spending 5-10 days elapsed time on for which you guys prepare for that customer and the customer doesn't show up, in 15 minutes, you get that 10 days elapsed times and hours of work accomplished like that. Sales teams win, lead conversion goes up, the prospects are happier.
Yeah, it's almost like it's reversed now, I think, because the way you just said that, you spend all this time preparing, the prospect doesn't show up. Now, the prospects are here and the sales reps aren't showing up. We're putting them through this 10-day cycle of having to be able to connect with us. And I think you hear a lot about that. People who buy software, when you're on the other side of this experience, it's kind of wild. When you just want to talk to somebody and you have to go through all of their hoops in order to be able to, to figure out if you're qualified to have a conversation with them, when you really just want to buy their services. And I think that's really interesting, piece that comes up a lot today. And I do agree that like not everybody is hitting the website anymore, that you got to be able to connect with them on whatever channel they're finding you on. And where they're living and where they're hanging out. But part of this, we were talking about it really in a sense of inbound. And I don't think it just stops with inbound. I want to kind of loop Joe into this and ask his opinion on this a bit too, on, where you see omnichannel being effective on the outbound channels too, because I think it's impacting them there as well. Curious what your take is, Joe.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all the stuff that was just mentioned, right? Even if I'm outbounding to you and I've got the right message market fit, you read my email, I expose a pain. Now, for whatever reason, I'm top of mind. Most people are going to do a little bit of research before they go and reply to the SDR, right? So one of two scenarios happens. One, I hit reply to the email. Yep, I'd love to book time. And then they're in the exact cycle you were just talking about, 3 to 5 days. And, maybe it's a weekend and it's off hours. And fact of the matter is, like, speed to lead matters. And if you can't connect with that person while you're top of mind, you got a 50% chance of never getting them again. So, I think it's wildly pressing. And then to speak more like specifically about outbound and outbound motions, if you're running tight rigor around like a tight ABM outbound motion, outbound will drive inbound, right? It kind of goes back to what I started to say was, I hit you with the message that resonated. Instead of replying, the other scenario there is you go to my website, you go check us out on G2, you go to our LinkedIn company page, you go somewhere. And now I've done something to trigger your interest a little bit. You've now spent 10 minutes searching the company, and now you're going to get inundated with forms and have to jump through hoops when I was the one that reached out to you and said, can I get 15 minutes? So we've absolutely got to be able to cater to the prospect in that moment. And whatever gets us face-to-face or on a phone or physically speaking faster is the company that's going to win. I mean, we heard the example earlier. You reach out to 3 companies. The one that replied first is the one that earned your business. This is no different. It doesn't matter if the channel's inbound or outbound. You have that person's attention for a moment in time. And if you cannot capitalize, and sometimes there's things that are out of your control that prevent you from capitalizing, like the fact they read your email at 10 p.m. and you're sound asleep, or they read your email on a Saturday, or they read your email on a day when you're on vacation, or whatever it might be, but they didn't get the instant response they wanted. Their brain has moved on to 15 other things, and your reply 3 days later gets lost in the shuffle. Opportunity gone.
Yeah, I'll add an example to this to make this a little bit more real as to what Joe was saying, because he's definitely on target there. The more you make yourself present to a buyer, the easier it is for the selling cycle to be as small as possible, as short as possible. So Lumen does a lot of work in space tech, and we build infrastructure for space tech companies. And we recently participated in a space tech conference, and we actually utilized 11 Sites technology. And what we did was we had this giveaway that we were giving. And in many cases, when you go to conferences, you have these giveaways. People take it, put it in their bags, and walk away. we were able to put this unique QR code on these giveaways, and you could scan the QR code, and immediately it would basically video call one of our inside sales folks that could respond to a customer that's interested in Lumen products, as an example. And that bridging that gap and creating forms of outbound that result in better inbound and faster inbound contacts is what's going to bridge that gap in terms of the sales cycles.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great example, because at the end of the day, like, we spend so much time talking about like customer experience. I'm a firm believer that customer experience starts at engagement point 1. Granted, they're not a customer yet, but the prospect experience is what's going to make them a customer. And if you can show them ease of getting the information they want, ease of contacting you and your sales team, you're miles ahead of the other guy.
Yeah, and then, I mean, Joe brought up an interesting point, and that we get that as a question is, what if the call comes in and I'm not available, right? So I think the right platform that you choose will give you the necessary infrastructure to handle that. One of them is obviously to have an interface where you can still greet the person who called you for your 2 a.m. in the morning and say, hey, these are typically the hours in which I answer my call. Feel free to call back then, or schedule a meeting like first thing tomorrow and we will connect. That's still a much better way of interacting with somebody than making them fill out a form and getting the meeting 5 days from now. But the way we use our solution is we do have a distributed international team. So that's the other advantage of all of this being online, is you don't need to have all of your sales team in one time zone, right? We do have people who can answer calls for us in India, in Germany, in New York, and in the Bay Area. So if you do that with the platform's routing algorithms, you can then pick the most suitable available salesperson so that you actually do get in front of your customer, right? So that's where, when earlier I said digital communication identity, that's sort of the difference of today's platforms online than the old-fashioned phone numbers. The phone number connected to one person. Or if it was the 800 number, you basically tortured your caller through 7 layers of menus, right? We can actually use intelligence to reduce that friction and figure out, okay, this person is coming from G2. I know that they have done their research. They have even been to our website. I have their email in their CRM, and I'm going to connect them to the right person right now so that somebody can talk to them. So that's important. The other thing that's also worth emphasizing is the relevance of sales cycle, right? Clearly, if this is like a $15 t-shirt, the customer doesn't want to talk to you, you don't want to talk to them. So that's not what we are talking about. And also, if this is like a $3 million RFP, that's going to have multiple conference calls, business dinners. Over there is a little bit more tolerance of whether you answer the call instantly or 5 days from now, because that first conference call is going to be a month from now. But anywhere in between, especially in B2B sales, SaaS platforms, most of it gets bought with a credit card. So that first meeting, you can almost nail the meeting and get the customer to sign up. And most of the time, all the prospect wants to do is to get some legitimacy and trust, to see a real person on the other side, as opposed to an AI chatbot that's never understanding what the question is. And there are always, I mean, if you are going to spend $500,000 a month, there are always some custom requirements that you want to clarify. And that's what you guys can do on that first call and move the deal forward. And the right platform will even allow you to bring somebody else into the meeting. So we have that ability that if somebody calls and there is a more technical question, I can just bring our CTO or somebody from the technical team right in there so that any objections, any questions, we can eliminate and move the deal forward. So I think it is exciting times for sales teams, because when the internet came, everything got redefined, all the yellow pages disappeared. And now that we are all back on video, I think what's going to happen is that dependence on text and keyboard is going to go away. And we will find more and more efficient ways of connecting to the prospects on their terms so that we can move the deal forward without wasting their time or our time prepping for a meeting that nobody is going to show up for.
Yeah, I think this is all really great stuff. We've got just a couple minutes left, and I at this point I'd like to try to pivot it into, you know, the tactical takeaways for people and how they can start doing this, right? And so we've got a poll up. If you haven't had a chance to respond to that yet, it's just asking, as a salesperson, how important is it for you to be the first, you know, to connect with a prospect? Would love to. I'm not sure. Yeah, everybody's voted very important. I don't think anybody disagrees with that. So now, the question really in the last few minutes that we have here, I would love to hear, you know, as you guys are doing omni-channel, right? I think we know that the customers are ready for it. Are the businesses ready? Are the sales teams ready? If I'm a salesperson out there today, or maybe I'm running a sales organization, you know, how would you tell me that we can get started on something like this? Where should we start? How do we figure out what channels they're talking on? How do we orchestrate, you know, managing those channels? How are we training the team up? Like, what's the most important piece to sort of kick off with? You know, and we've got a couple minutes left, so, you know, would love to hear your answers.
So SK, you implemented this. How did it work for you?
Yeah, I think, you know, to the question, like how you basically set up your team's ability to interface with your customers is paramount, right? There are various ways to engage your customers, and shortening the cycle is important. You don't want to lose X number of days just to calendar a meeting. The ability to just get engaged right when the customer wants to talk to you is pretty important. And that's the reason why, you know, utilizing this technology for that Space Tech Expo that we joined, because we wanted to capture when it's top of mind, when it's presence for the customer to call in at their convenience. I think it's important.
So I think the personality of the people answering the calls comes into play. I mean, I know engineers, they don't like to be interrupted, right? So when they're working on something, don't call me, leave me alone. But that's not what sales is all about, right? Sales needs to be, I'm ready to talk to you when you want to talk to me, right? You just cannot afford saying, oh, I'll talk to you tomorrow. But the good news is it's also not in the DNA of salespeople, right? So we all are, I mean, I field a lot of calls during the day. I may be working on something else, but I'm happy that somebody's calling, because that's a potential prospect who wants to see how the solution is going to work for them. Rafael, our VP marketing, answers, or whoever on the company. And we don't even stop at the revenue generation. It's also the customer success, because customer success is also all the renewals that we are getting. So it's in the entire life cycle of a relationship with a prospect, converting them into a customer and retaining them as a customer. And that only works if you show the prospect the respect of being timely on their requests.
Timely and meeting where they're at. And so I know we've talked a bunch about this. We're going to wrap up the session here, but what I'd like to just say is, like, look, my takeaway from all this stuff, I think, Alex, is you know, the product that you have, the way that you've described it, the real biggest thing I took out of it is that, like, listen, we need to be on the channels where people are. That's not good enough anymore. We need to be able to then offer a way to connect with them right there, instead of sending them to, you know, a form or a website or any of those things. And so I think you've got a really great method there for the customers. And I also just think that, you know, from a business organizational standpoint, it seems like it'd be really easy to slice into the things that we're already doing. So look, all great stuff. We're going to wrap up this part of the session now, but 11Site has a booth. If you want to continue the conversation with Alex, you know, please transfer over to that. And from that standpoint, Joe, SK, Alex, thanks so much for being a part of this conversation today. Really enjoyed it.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Right. And you can always come to our website and call us from there, or see us on LinkedIn and call us from there too.
Love it. Thanks, guys.
All right. Take care, guys. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.